Do you forget people's names easily? If you do, does this make you a bad language learner? No, it doesn't. And today I'm going to talk to you about why. Welcome to the English Breakthrough for Germans podcast. Ich heiße Mike Budden und ich bin gebürtiger Australier und wohne insgesamt 13 Jahre in Deutschland. Ich unterrichte Englisch und Deutsch und ich helfe Deutschen, deren Schulenglisch nicht mehr ausreicht und bringe ihnen nützliche Lernstrategien für dauerhaftes Lernen bei, damit Englisch endlich kein Thema mehr ist. In this episode of the podcast, I would like to talk about something interesting with names. I would like to talk about remembering people's names and what we can do, what we can learn about vocabulary learning from strategies that people use to remember people's names. I personally have never been good at remembering people's names, and I actually believe that this is connected to language learning for me. And it has helped me as well. Because I felt I was forgetful, I developed some special habits to overcome my forgetfulness. And this really helped me remember new words. And it's the same with people's names when I use strategies there as well. So do you have any strategies for remembering people's names? I wonder if you already use some of the strategies that I'm going to talk about today, and if we can use some of these strategies for vocabulary learning as well. So a lot in my life, even up until today, I found a situation similar to what I'm going to describe to you. So I might be somewhere socially, and when I go around the room, if there are some people there that I don't know, if I hear people's names quickly, like 3 or 4 names, I forget them quickly as well. Okay, I would even go as far as saying that sometimes my behavior changes a little bit in social situations, and this might lead me to avoid being direct and introducing myself to people straight away, and I might wait a little bit longer before I introduce myself to somebody, or I might wait until they introduce themselves to me. So say I arrive at a small gathering, a small social gathering, and there are about 5 people I don't know there. I might just wait until they come to me and introduce themselves, because I know otherwise if I say to them, hey, what's your name? And I shake their hand and I hear their name, I will probably forget their name moments later. And I find this a little bit embarrassing. But I also think it happens to a lot of different people, and it doesn't only affect me. Many people say that right at the beginning when they meet, many people say when they meet somebody new for the first time, hey, sorry, I'm not good at remembering names. So hopefully that person doesn't take it personally when somebody forgets their name. Another situation I found it difficult to remember people's names is in football. So I've been playing football for about a year and a half now, on and off, not really regularly. But I have been to a number of training sessions where we've met some new people and we try to learn their names. So the way that we normally do it is we're out on the football field and we're standing around in a circle. So we have done a warm-up and then we're doing some warm-up stretches. And then after that, we'll say, okay, there's some new people here, so what's everybody's name? And then we'll go around the circle and everybody will say their name really, really fast. And I can really never remember them. So it might be like, Tom, Peter, Frank, Aidan, Salman, Sajid, Mark. And the names just fly past. Not to mention the fact that the group is completely international. So there's a mix of English native speakers and different accents, as well as some international accents as well. And in this situation, you can't see the names written down, so that makes it even harder. And in football, it's actually really important to remember people's names. So usually I go and ask them individually before we start playing together, or once we start playing together. And that's easier at that point because I've watched them for a little bit and I go, I need to know that person's name. As a teacher, it's also really important that I learn the students' names. In the classroom, I need to be able to connect with my students, and that works better if I know their names. So I developed a little strategy, a little habit that I use when I have a new class. When I'm in the classroom, what I like to do is draw a basic floor plan of the classroom. So if there are 3 desks, one on the left, one on the right, one at the back, I draw an outline of those 3 desks and then I write the names of the students on those positions on my little floor plan. When they're doing an activity and they are busy, then I take the piece of paper and I look at the room and I repeat the names of the students to myself. A few years ago, I was in Australia and I was working in schools, in high schools, with classes of up to 30 teenagers. What I would do is print out the list of the students' names with their photos as well. The system that we had there also had their photos. And this was really handy exactly for this situation. I didn't have the students for very long, maybe just 3 weeks, and it's difficult for me to control the room and to manage the classroom anyway, so it was very, very helpful for me to also know the students' names. And because I had the photos, I could test myself in the evening just by looking at the photos. Sometimes there are little tricks you can use which can help you remember a person's name. Or when you're telling your name as well. So preparing for this podcast, I thought about my dad. And my dad, who has the same surname as me, so Budden, he says, it's like the word sudden, but with a B. And in another situation, I had a colleague in Australia around 2009. And this colleague was from Malaysia. And his name was Gunnar, Guna. He knew his name was a bit tricky for Australians to remember, so he would usually say, "You're gonna remember me." And of course, we did remember him and remember his name because of that. So why is it that these strategies work? Things like sudden with a B or "you're gonna remember me" work because they're memorable and they link knowledge to other things that we know, maybe about language or something else. So in German, we have this word Eselsbrücke, and I'm really sorry, we don't really have an English translation for this. You could say something like memory hook or a little memory trick, but Eselsbrücke is a really common word, which we don't have in English. So with these strategies and some Google searches, I've come up with a short list of how different people might go about remembering people's names a little bit better. And we'll talk about the connection to language learning as well in a moment. So number 1, use the person's name again. So if somebody introduces themselves to you, you can say it straight back to them. If they say, "Hey, my name's Mark," you say, "It's nice to meet you, Mark." Okay, strategy number 2, repeat the person's name in your mind. So if they say, "Oh, hi, my name's Mark," you go, "Great." Or not nice to meet you, Mark, but maybe you hear the name in another context and, they're speaking to somebody else and then you hear their name. So you go in your mind, Mark, Mark, Mark. Number 3, if you have a chance to read the name by looking at WhatsApp or something, maybe you're going to a social event and there are some people going that you don't know, but you have their names in WhatsApp. Or if you have a list of your colleagues, for example, at work, and you have some new colleagues, then you can look at their names in advance and then combine that with reading it aloud or hearing the name in your mind. Another strategy that I personally use is think of a person that you know who has the same name as that person, and you try to combine or connect those two people in your mind. So if you meet somebody new who's called Tim, and you already have a friend called Tim, then you can think about that previous friend while you're looking at the new Tim, and then you can make a connection in your mind to that Tim. You only need this in the beginning, obviously. After a little while, it's not necessary anymore. Number 5, try to focus on a distinct physical feature, like hair or a piece of clothing that person is wearing. Maybe they have a beard or blonde hair, or they're wearing a red shirt or have an interesting necklace. Necklace is Halskette in German, necklace. Number 6, connect the name to something else you know. So how I did this I did this one time with the German name Ute. Ute was a neighbor of mine in one of my first apartments in Berlin. And Ute is spelled UTE, which is an Australian English word, which stands for utility vehicle or ute. It's kind of like a pickup truck, but a little bit smaller. A lot of tradespeople in Australia have utes. So whenever I saw her, I thought about the ute. I made a connection between her driving this particular kind of car. And just a little interesting fun fact, actually. Did you know it's actually harder to remember names which you don't know or you don't have sounds for in your first language? So if you're a German speaker, it might be difficult for you to remember a Spanish name like Jorge. Or maybe when you were younger, the English word Matthew was different because of the TH sound. The following names in German might be difficult for English speakers. Silke. They might say Silky or Silke or something. Matthias. I've heard English speakers say Matthias. Achim might be pronounced Achim. So of course this is similar to vocabulary, right? So if we find it difficult to pronounce a word, we might choose to avoid that word instead. Yeah. So I remember one teacher saying in Spain that his students really struggled with the word infrastructure. So that was a word that they began to avoid. Okay, so let's come back to language learning again. Now, why is it effective for us to say the word aloud, the name aloud, or the word aloud? Well, in the last few years, scholars, so people who write about language learning, have written about a language learning system in our brain which uses the short-term memory, die Kurzzeitgedächtnis, the short-term memory, and that's something in the brain called the phonological loop, or die phonologische Schleife. So this phonological loop enables you to hold on to the sound of some words in your mind for a few seconds. So I'm going to finish a sentence and you just hold on to the last few words of this sentence. Okay, so maybe you heard my voice in your mind then. So it has been shown that this phonological loop is essential for language retention. So this explains why repeating someone's name in your mind can have positive effects on you remembering their name. And of course, it's useful for language learning as well and vocabulary. So it also shows why it was difficult for me to remember the names at football training, because we had to move around the circle so quickly and my brain didn't have enough time to focus on the sound of that person's name in my mind. So remember, another thing that works is by connecting the name to some other information. So their face, for example, you can remember their face. You can look at their face for a few seconds longer, or you can remember a physical feature or a piece of clothing. So here it's about connecting knowledge too. So you connect their name to their visual appearance. So of course we can do this with language learning. So when you get a new word, you can try to connect it to something else, or something that you might say with that word. So you're thinking about some other knowledge. So let's say you just learned the word to wonder, W-O-N-D-E-R. To wonder means to think, right? So you're curious about something, or in German you might say something like, ich frage mich, wie die Leute dort wohnen. So you would say, oh, I wonder how the people live there. Yeah, so wonder. So if you hear this word, for example, for the first time, you might try to put it in a sentence, like the sentence I just said, I wonder how the people live there. Or you might say, I wonder what my son is doing right now. So you can connect the vocabulary to your world. Okay? You can put it in a sentence and, some kind of context in which you would use that word. Now, another technique which is really effective for language learning that I used, so remember how I talked about drawing a floor plan of the classroom, and I also looked at the photos of the students on the class list. So this is something in language learning called retrieval practice. Retrieval means abrufen, okay? So you're just practicing that you know that word. So you could look at the photos in the case of the students' names, or you could make some flashcards. Flashcards are a really good way to use to do retrieval practice. Flashcards are Karteikarten. Okay, so flashcards are very useful. But I will say at this point that it's much easier to learn vocabulary when you can remember where the word has come from. So I really don't advise you to use flashcards if you didn't make them yourself. It's better to think to remember where it comes from. I'll give you an example of why this can be useful. So actually on the weekend I was in France for a couple of days, and I saw a street sign which means no entry. It's that red sign that has it's a red circle with a white line through the middle, and below it said sauf, and then it has a picture of a bike. Yeah, so I immediately knew it means no entry, but bikes accepted. And the reason that I knew this is because sauf, S-A-U-F, is the word that I saw in one of the books I was reading. It's an A1 book for learners, for French learners. I immediately recognized the word and thought of the context in which I discovered the word. In the book, it talks about how all of the children are asleep. Everybody is asleep in the city except for the moon. And the sentence is sauf la lune. And I'll never forget that because of that situation. But with flashcards, we can artificially create this kind of association as well. Yeah. So by artificially, I mean, I saw the word sauf, on the street in France, but it's difficult to have that visual clue all the time. So instead of seeing that sign in France, I can create a flashcard of the word sauf. And then every time I see that word, it will remind me of the original context in that book that I read it in. And that strengthens the connection between that word and the meaning. Okay, so to summarize, when we're remembering people's names or we're remembering vocabulary, there are some things that can help us remember those things better in future. Okay, so number 1, focus on the sound in your mind. Even better, read the word aloud if you can. So with a person's name, you repeat the name back to them, or if you're learning vocabulary, you repeat the word aloud. Don't just do it silently. It's good to get in the habit of doing it aloud. Number 2, use the name in context. So you're looking at the person and you say the person's name, or you use a word that you've just learned and you put it in a sentence that is it in context. So you're thinking about when you would use that word. And the last one is use retrieval practice. And remember, flashcards are a great way to do this as well. All right, and remember when you're selecting vocabulary too, always ask yourself, is this a useful word for me to learn? If you can't quickly think of a situation in which you could use that word, it probably shouldn't be your priority to learn that word. So, these are some strategies that I started using when I was learning. When I was learning German, I had a vocabulary program that had flashcards in it, and I was trying to train about 90 words a day, 3 to 4 times a week. And that really, really helped me. So, I would say that's because I thought I was forgetful. And because I thought I was forgetful, I started using these strategies, and they really, really helped me learn German. So what do you think? Are people who are forgetful better language learners because they use strategies more consciously than people who maybe just assume they're good at remembering? So for me, that was certainly true. Okay, thanks very much for listening today. I hope you've enjoyed the podcast, and I hope to have you along next time too. See you later.